I'm about to cramp. Alright, here's another bread baking video, and today we'll be making milk bread. By hand, actually. I won't be using a machine to show you all it's possible by hand. Milk bread's been pretty hyped up by Asians everywhere, which is funny because I didn't know what type of bread it was until I made it. I actually realized once I did, it's basically the same bread you can get at the Chinese bakeries. I doubled and changed a bit of this recipe from this YouTuber called the ChainBaker. If you like baking bread, you should check out his channel because although he's not super popular yet, he's very informative. I'll link the channel on the top right, but let's get right to it. Let's start with 180 grams of milk in a saucepan or pot. We will also need 40 grams of all-purpose flour and a pinch of Vital Wheat Gluten. If you don't have Vital Wheat Gluten, just use 40 grams of bread flour instead. I wanted to test this recipe out using Vital Wheat Gluten to see if it would make any difference. Stir the flour mixture into the milk and we will mix it under medium-low heat. What we're making right now is the Tangzhong, which is like a roux mixture. The flour will gelatinize with the milk and it will eventually make a paste. This paste is what gives milk bread its distinctive soft and fluffy nature, and apparently it makes it last longer. The milk mixture is slowly thickening as you see, so make sure to keep stirring so it doesn't burn and to get rid of any lumps. Once it starts getting around this consistency, give or take 5 minutes, keep stirring and take it off the heat, and we're going to keep stirring it until it becomes a paste basically. We want to keep stirring to make sure there's no dry flour, and eventually the paste will look like this. Grab another bowl so we can transfer the Tangzhong to cool it down while we prep the rest of our ingredients. We want to cool it down so the yeast won't be killed off from the excessive heat. Don't be a murderer, you know what I mean? Heat up 100 grams of milk until it's around 100 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a method to test out if your yeast is alive. Add a pinch of sugar and then your 4 grams of active dry yeast. Give this a good mix and then we will wait around 5 minutes. If your yeast is alive, you should see it bubbling like this. You can see those dots rising to the surface, that's the yeast showing activity. I bought yeast recently so I know there's no problem, but this is a good test to see if your yeast is alive. After this test, we can add in 40 grams of sugar and 8 grams of salt. We will also stir in 60 grams of butter as well. Give this all a good mix, and I forgot to record on camera, but I measured out the flour quantity we will need ahead of time. We will need 396 grams of all-purpose flour and 4 grams of Vital Wheat Gluten. You can also just use 400 grams of bread flour as well. Alright, time to mix everything together by putting in your cooled down Tangzhong first. Make sure it's cooled down or the yeast will die and you're not going to have bread at that point. Stir in your milk and butter mixture and you can start mixing it together. This dough will feel very dry, but keep on mixing, it'll eventually all come together. Eventually I stop mixing with my spatula and I start using my hands instead. We basically need to mix this dough with all the dry flour before we begin kneading it, or else it will become very messy on your counter. I'm not gonna lie, I usually just use my KitchenAid, but not everyone has one, so I'll show it by hand for this one video. Once no dry flour is seen anymore, you can plop it on a clean work surface and we will need to knead this dough. Oh god, picked the wrong day to work out my arms, because this is definitely an arm workout already. I'm sure whoever's watching is definitely stronger than me though, so no worries about that. Okay, so we're going to knead this dough anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes in order to develop the gluten structure. So here's the method the ChainBaker recommends for kneading dough, which is pushing down and forward with one hand and folding the dough back with your other hand. I also alternated different methods because this is my first time kneading by hand, so I wanted to see what worked well for me. As you saw previously before, I used both hands to push it down, and it works too. Just use whatever's comfortable for you, to be honest. So I'm gonna speed up this footage because I don't think you want to sit here for 10 minutes watching me push dough. I'm gonna stop kneading at 8 minutes to show you how the dough got a lot more stretchy and smooth. And then we're gonna perform the window pane test to see if we developed the gluten enough. So we're going to tear off a piece of dough and start stretching it as thin as you can. If you can get it to the point where it's thin enough to almost see your finger, your dough is ready. If not, like me, I'm going to have to continue to knead it for another 1 to 2 minutes. I think 10 minutes should be enough time, but if you're unsure, just do the window pane test. Alright, I'm just going to cut straight to this part. This is where I'm going to do the window pane test to show you what I mean by stretching it thin enough. As you can see, I've been stretching it slowly, and soon you're going to see how thin I can get it. It may be hard to see on my camera, but if you can see that there's like a little clear film basically, and you can almost see my fingertips, like right here. If you got it this clear enough and this stretchy, your dough is ready to go, and here we're going to basically make it into a ball. Start by folding it around all the way into the center. Flip it around and start tucking the dough under itself by keeping contact with the work surface and the dough, and you're going to make something that looks like a ball, like this. Put it back in the bowl, and then we're going to cover it with plastic wrap, and we got to let this ferment for anywhere from 1 to 1.5 hours, I would say. Basically, the dough should almost double its size. You're going to have to judge how long to wait as everyone's kitchen is different, but it should look something like this compared to the original size that I'll show on the top right. The dough should look bouncy and puffy, and if you poke your finger into it, it should spring back just a little bit. Alright, we're going to take the dough out and roll it into a log before placing it into our loaf pan. Excuse me for trying to play with the dough. So use your fingers and not just your fingertips and try to shape it into a rectangle shape. Eventually you can use a rolling pin like I do, but if you don't, it's okay, you can always just stretch it by hand. Oh man, my wide back's covering the camera. Sorry about that. But jokes aside, just keep rolling it out into a rectangle shape, and you want it basically the size and length of your loaf pan like I check right here. Once you get around there, I'll show you what to do. First, we're going to take the top of the dough and start tucking it under itself, and then seal the seam by pressing it down. Then we're going to roll it again, making sure to press down when the dough touches itself again, and we're going to keep doing this until the very end. This will basically make like a log. So once you roll everything down to the very end, I'll try to tuck in the ends so they're not exposed and place everything seam size down into my buttered up loaf pan for the final proof. I like to push the dough down a bit to even it out, and if your dough doesn't reach all the way to the sides, don't worry, as your dough is going to proof and it should fill in the minor gaps. By the way, this is a 9x5 loaf pan. I forgot to show on camera, but make sure to cover it with plastic wrap, and then we're going to proof it for another hour. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit as well. Alright, we're going to test if it's proof enough through the finger poke test. If you poke the dough and it springs back just a little bit, then it's proofed enough. We're going to brush the dough with an egg wash, which is basically 1 cracked egg beaten with a tablespoon of milk. When you bake this dough with the egg wash, it's going to give it a nice golden brown crust. Pop this baby anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes and the bread should be good to go. When you take it out of the oven, it should look like this, a nice golden brown crust, and oh man, that smell is amazing in your house. Wait around 30 minutes before you cut into the bread to let it cool down. Oh man, look at that crumb, not too bad either. I think even with the Vital Wheat Gluten compared to bread flour, this turned out pretty good. This takes some effort, I'm not gonna lie, but if you're willing to give it a shot, this is definitely better than your typical white bread from the store. Make sure you have some ready for next week, as we're gonna do. Hey, thanks for watching my video everyone, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you did, and follow me on Instagram at WeCanCooks. Take it easy everyone.